You know, for over 100 years, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had a policy that barred black men from its priesthood. But what's really fascinating isn't just the ban itself, it's how the reasons for that ban have changed so dramatically over time. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into that shifting story, from what was taught as a divine curse to what is now a disavowed theory.
All right, so here's the big question we're trying to answer. Why were black men once banned from the Mormon priesthood? Now, the question sounds simple, but the answers, well, they're complicated, and they've evolved a lot, taking us from the 1800s right into the 21st century.
Okay, so to get our bearings, let's just run through a quick timeline. The ban gets publicly announced around 1852. It stays in place all the way until 1978, when it's lifted. And then in 2013, we get a huge shift in the official story with a new historical essay published by the church itself.
So, first up, let's talk about the ban itself. This was a policy that got started around 1852 under the second president of the church, Brigham Young.
And we're not talking about some short-lived policy here. The priesthood restriction for men of black African descent lasted for 126 years. Just think about that for a second. That is a huge chunk of the church's history.
So, you gotta ask, right? What was the official reason for this century-long ban? Well, for most of that time, the explanation wasn't just presented as a policy, it was taught as core doctrine. And to really get it, you first have to understand a key concept in Mormon theology. And that concept is the idea of a pre-existence. The belief is that every single person lived as a spirit with God before they ever came to earth. And here's the crucial part. Your choices and your actions back then, in that pre-mortal life, could directly affect your situation here on earth.
And this is where we see that first justification really take shape. Past church leaders like the 10th President Joseph Fielding Smith, they taught this explicitly. Listen to this quote from him. He said that a person's race was a direct result of their conduct in the pre-mortal life. It was, in his words, the reason someone might be born black and with other disadvantages.
So this whole doctrine really boiled down to two main justifications that you'd hear over and over again. The first was what's called the curse of Cain, this idea that black skin was a divine mark for the biblical sin of Cain killing his brother Abel. The second was the belief that black people had been less valiant, maybe even neutral, during a huge war in heaven before they came to earth.
And Brigham Young, the guy who actually put the ban in place, he didn't mince words. He taught that the mark of this curse was a flat nose and black skin, and that the ban itself would last until some far-off future when, as he said, all the other descendants of Adam have received the promises. And this is a really, really important point. For more than 100 years, this wasn't talked about as some kind of temporary human policy. No. It was framed and taught as an eternal doctrine, a direct command from God himself.
I mean, it doesn't get much clearer than this. As late as 1951, the First Presidency, that's the highest governing body in the church, they put out an official statement saying the ban was not a matter of policy, but of direct commandment from the Lord. They called it foundational doctrine. Okay, so for more than a century, that was the story. It was doctrine. And then, everything changed. Suddenly.
It all happened on June 8th, 1978. Church leaders announced a new revelation. It's now known as Official Declaration 2, and it ended the priesthood ban, stating that the long-promised day has come. Just like that, it was over.
So you might be wondering, what was going on at the time? Why then? Well, according to the sources, the church was facing some very real, practical challenges. It was growing like crazy around the world, especially in Brazil, where they were building a new temple. And because of Brazil's deeply mixed-race population, they were running into a serious problem. Many of the faithful members who had sacrificed to build the temple would have been barred from even entering it under the old rules.
Now, the 1978 revelation ended the ban, right? But it didn't really explain why it started in the first place. For that, we have to jump forward a few decades, when the church itself came forward with a totally new historical narrative.
This brings us to 2013, when the church published an official essay on its own website called Race and the Priesthood. And this essay, it marked a fundamental pivot in how the ban's history was officially talked about.
And the shift here is, well, it's pretty stunning. Just look at the difference. On the one hand, you have that 1951 statement calling the ban a direct commandment from the Lord. But on the other hand, the 2013 essay flat out disavows the theories advanced in the past. The very same justifications that were once called doctrine were now officially being called just theories.
So, what the 2013 essay essentially does is move the origin of the ban from God to man. It states that the policy began with Brigham Young and was heavily influenced by the widespread racism of that time period, basically stripping the ban of any divine origin.
But here's the thing. Just because the official history changes on a website doesn't mean everyone gets the memo. And this last part of the story shows just how much tension can still exist around this topic right inside the faith community.
Let's look at this real-world story from a Salt Lake Tribune article. There's a Sunday school teacher named Brian Dawson, and a student asks him about the ban. So the next week, Brian does what you'd expect. He uses the church's own official 2013 essay to explain it. But then a parent complains, and this is where it gets complicated. The local leader, his bishop, tells Brian that history is irrelevant and that he shouldn't use the essay. And when Brian insisted on using the church's own official materials, he was released from his teaching position.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem. As one Mormon author, Tamu Smith, put it, it's great that the essay's on the church's website, but that doesn't mean people actually know about it or even believe it.
And that really leaves us with this much bigger question to chew on, right? This whole story, with its incredible shifts from divine doctrine to a disavowed theory, it brings up a challenge that's bigger than just one organization. When official histories get rewritten, how are we supposed to make sense of what came before?